There is a big problem with people who want change. People throughout history have always wanted change. They always wanted to live a different life, a better life. Anything different than things have been going in their own way, in their own life, in their own times, with their own generation. The biggest problem about that is typically when a society has been living in dictatorship, in hard times, in people who only thought their own ideals. The biggest problem, which also history underlined, is that when such governments, when such forms of rulership are broken down and other people come, most of all cases, if not all of those, it's always someone who has suffered a lot because of the previous regime. And they house so much hatred. And in a way, they might seek the idea to make a better world, but they have so much hatred towards the old system. They have invested so much energy into that that unfortunately what they create afterwards is a similar one because they have the same energy of the so-called protectors, right? What is a typical aspect of all authoritarian regimes? It's all for your protection, right? Protection is a code name for being a slave, right? Because you can only be protected when you are inside a cage. When you are inside a cage, you don't have much of a freedom, anyways, right? And you're surrounded by people who live similarly, who simply embrace their cage, whatever it is. It doesn't matter, they just accept it. He who gives up their freedom for security deserves neither of those, right? When you look at writings throughout the history, right, Aristotle, Cicero, and, well, Platon, many others stated the same thing. When a certain regime falls, a new one comes, but typically it is equally barbaric, equally brutal, right? It is similar, more or less. You can look in the Christian world, in the Islamic world, anywhere you want. It doesn't matter what religion, what culture there are. Typically, so much hatred is fueled into people. People fuel so much also into them that ultimately they end up being the monsters that they swore that they would fight against. Unfortunately, they do become those monsters. So when people want change, they have to understand that change doesn't come by simply going out in the streets and fluttering some flags and claiming that you want freedom. Change won't come if you break someone else's business, right? You break some windows, you upturn some cars and such. Change comes when you actually overthrow that specific system. But as I said, the problem is misery will always procreate something new. There is a Hitler, a Stalin, any kind of the worst beings of our society. There are such elements in each and every generation because all generations have had this uh, idea of abandonment, this idea of misery, being kept in the dark, being lied that you're working towards building a new society. And you reach a certain age when you ask yourself, where is this so called new society, right? Look at so many countries. They joined NATO thinking that they would be more secure. And then ultimately they end up realizing that, well, where is their so called security? Take, for example, Sweden, right? In Sweden, now they have so many American bases, exactly the same thing that's happening in Romania. Sweden has 15 military bases, right? NATO bases, which pose it as a threat to Russia, right? The Western propaganda has always been far superior to the East. So obviously, it's much better, much smoother when it comes to lying people. And a lot of people think the Russians are the bad guys. In the end, when a war starts and people start dying, does it matter anymore who the bad guy is, right? The problem is, let's actually seek a way through which you stop the war. When the war stops, then you can draw people to, you know, to the right trials. Although the problem is, in many times, the trials are the same thing with the authoritarian regimes falling. Someone comes in and they do another authoritarian act, right? When the so-called allies won the war, obviously they did their own decision making. nobody cared much who was guilty or not. It was all about exterminating everyone who was of the opposite side. And obviously everyone would be treated as bad, and afterwards in documentaries you see it as an American behavior. They tell you how great those enemies were during the fight, but it's all just a charade anyways, because you're most likely convinced that everything regarding the so-called North Atlantic treatment, not America, not Europe themselves, the North Atlantic administrations and the such, NATO and obviously the American administration, it's nothing else but a charade. What did they say it a long time ago? It's all just a little party, but you're not invited, right? So people have to create great groups, groups of people that will find the strength to actually commit to sacrifice and the such. See, overthrowing the government takes a lot of courage. Let's say you bust in, you kill all the politicians and the such. Now what do? You have so much more chaos than initially, because you need to put some people in there. Whom you gonna find? You need to have some good representatives, people who don't have skellies in their, in their cupboards, people who don't have, shady pasts, people whom you can trust. Why do you think the social media and the such? It's all about teaching people how to not trust people anymore. How can you trust a big chunk of the population when they're all doing the same thing? They're not even questioning anything, right? And a lot of people are worried about saving the masses. You're never going to save the masses. You're going to save some people, but some of them, if not most of them, will freely police for the system because they're not willing to give up their comfort zone. Their misery is their comfort zone. You're not going to pull them out of those. Because like all living beings on this planet, comfort is our greatest poison, right? When you look at feminine energy, typically it is drawn more particularly to comfort because you need comfort in order to have a family. Masculine energy is typically well known with the idea of going through, the dirty work and the such. Because if you want to build a society, you're going to need both masculine and feminine energy. If you take a look at mass media and society as it's been, in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, there has been a swap from, the old masculine approach of the iron fist to the more feminine, the wounded feminine. What do the American administrations tell you? They just invite you in their misery, right? They're no longer those leaders that, smack their fist against the table and they promise you that they will crush the opposition, right? They're now softly speaking. It's like everything is so calm and serene nowadays, right? They're just using smooth talk and voices. When you look even at the American presidents, for some reason Trump seems an exception in this. But if you look at all the American presidents, they have the same diction. They use kind of the same words. And you're thinking that you're going to bring down a government with just some walking outside with flying banners and such. It's going to take way more than that. Even if you bring down your freaking government, you're still having the secret services. They will go outside. They will wait for the chaos to simply burn because most of the people who are simply comfortable with the old system will start rebelling against the ones who will try to do great things and who will try to rebuild the nation, because people who have given up hope, they never have patience, one of the greatest powers in the world. They will start asking, where's the change, where's the change, where's the change? They're well too used to the misery they were in. That is their comfort zone. They will fight for it. Maybe they will wait a bit, hoping for a change. But if that change doesn't come soon, they will gladly overthrow those who will want to build a new society if you're not quick enough, if you're not good enough at providing them with some things that they need, right? If we are to take into account a great example of societal restructuring, you can take a look, for example, at Adolf Hitler. Yes, obviously he's very contested because anti-Semitism and, all those bozos promoting whatever they think. But look at how Germany was before the Second World War, right? When Hitler came to power, not himself only, right? The apparata that he created, right? The systems that he put into function, right? They created a country that quickly became one of the greatest powers in the world. They were one of the lowest, almost inexistent economically. They had so much external debt. People were committing suicide. Berlin was the capital of the world when it came to decadence, pornography, homosexuality, and all sorts of these things, right? Transgenderism was there. It was mentioned everywhere. Nightclubs, and people who were doing not art but pornographic art to earn a living, right? Pornographic movies and the such. It was Sodom and Gomorrah united. And the so called National Socialist regime did a huge change. Yeah, sure, a lot of people were killed afterwards, unfortunately, Jewish people also, and well, other minorities. Then came a war and the such. A lot of these is convoluted. The truth is still out there somewhere, but it's definitely not in your history books. But we can look, for example, one country in a few years turning from the most miserable country in the whole world, turning into a superpower. Well, I would say that is a huge example. And a lot of people, so called freedom seekers, change seekers, I would think they have some things to learn about what was implemented in Germany. I'm not saying necessarily take National Socialism into account, because you can create a change without necessarily replicating the whole system. You can take some things from communism, we can take some things from socialism, make a combination of those and as such, right? Because there are pros and cons in all the things that exist, right? Even religions have their pros and cons. Even all sorts of meanings that we have created, literatures and the such, they all have their limitations and the such. Plus, you have to also take into account maybe National Socialism is not going to help much nowadays, right? It was good in those times, 100 years ago almost. And well, times have changed. We never know. Each country will have its own way to enact things. You have to understand blood will be spilled. Stop it with all these stupid things about being peaceful and being serene. Look at where society has gone with all your peace. Look at the Middle East. Do you think there's any peace gonna be there? Do you think those people care about your fucking peace and about your telling them to be peaceful when your neighbor is gonna gun them down the first moment they have? Look at those, how much they're killing themselves. Arabs in between themselves, Jewish people, one another, one neighbor killing the other. It's all just a huge charade in there, because ultimately those people are suffering, yes, but in the end, there are those who are making a huge advantage out of that, right? Those people who are selling those parties the weapons. Because if you take a look at both the sides in there who fight, well, everyone blames Hamas for having bombed Israel. But the question is, does Israel actually also have a blame? Because a war never starts with someone being completely innocent and the other one busting in. While at the same time, we have to take into account the other possibility. If you're entirely innocent, obviously some other people will take you into account. Because don't forget one aspect of misery. If you are a pure being, well, misery will seek to kill you. Because misery cannot accept something which is pure at heart. Because pure at heart means you're connected with forces beyond misery. Forces that will tell you misery is not important. You're like an open candle. And dark forces don't want an open candle. Because a burning candle is something that can light other candles. And when that happens, people will start waking up. The problem with the old, let's call it American system, is that they know people are waking up, but people are far from organized. You need people, and those people need to know what it means to take huge responsibilities. Because rebuilding a country from scratch is gonna take a lot of effort. Do you think people in Iraq will change any fucking thing about their country being turned into chaos, into what it is, after it's been flattened by Iraqi freedom? Do you think things in Afghanistan will be changed if, let's say, all the men and women in there start getting out with flying banners and, Flower power? Do you think things in Europe will change? Do you think the Islamists, the fanatic ones, okay, we're not dealing with true Islamism there, right? Do you think those people will simply go home? It's like, oh, okay, these people want their homes back. No, they're gonna keep popping up. You'll have to understand there may be a time when some of those fuckers might actually have to be exterminated in mass. Because guess what? They are armed people. They're doing robberies. You have seen what kind of people many of those are. I'm not saying all those illegal migrants are a problem, but some of them, many of them unfortunately, have proven it so. You will have to deal with more and more numbers of armed people who will kill your population. If you want peace against such intrusions, you will have to understand bloodshed will be inevitable. Stop trying to present peace in the face of fanatics who come to exterminate you. A fanatic means everyone who believes otherwise than their own point of view is an enemy who must die. Yes, you have to understand that. Anyone who believes otherwise is the enemy. Yes? Those people say they will die for their belief. Yes? If someone is willing to die for a belief, they are equally willing, at least equally willing, to kill for their belief. Yes? It doesn't matter whether it is religious, political, or whatever. Look at people in the world. Yes? People fight because they think black people are superior. They think white people are superior. They think, I don't know, whatever silly band of musicians is superior. People fight because of football teams. Like, really now? Do you think those football teams even care about you fighting one another? Those football players, they're living their life, right? Whether they lose the championship or not, well, they had a chance to participate in that. What are you doing with your life though? This is a question you should always ask yourself. When you wake up in the morning, when you sip your coffee, whatever you're doing, spend a few seconds, look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what is it that you're doing with your life? Some people in France, in Germany, they are actually fighting for a change. But the biggest problem is, let's say you overthrow your governments. Now what? Because suddenly you exposed yourself before some people, the masses, who simply don't care, who were very comfortable with the old system and with aliens, yes? Not those in the skies. Those people who came there, illegal migrants, who don't care what government they have. They just want a home, yes? Or some of them just want to kill people. Because, well, you have to understand, somewhere in the Quran it is said, when their Jesus comes, he will destroy the cross. So you have to understand, well, the true Islamists don't care much about that. If you look in the last, let's say, 100 years, there wasn't much of a war in between Islam declaring war on Christianity, right? I'm saying a great scale war, right? The first and second war were not a war against Islam or against Christianity, right? Those people live their own lives. Whatever is said in a book, well, it's just a book in the end. Obviously, a holy book is slightly more important, but what you do with your life is far more important than what a book says. Islam has been saying for a long time, don't eat pork meat. Well, you'll see people in Turkey, they start doing it. You'll see people in the world actually do that, right? But the Western agenda tells you that, hey, Islam is bad, they're forcing hijabs. What happened in Iran? They tried to impose a law that Islam women must wear a hijab. If they wanted to impose such a law, what did it mean? That they were not forced to do that, right? The truth is before you, but you have to open those beautiful eyes to read it, right? Did you know that in the Middle East, there were huge movements to try to make their governments to do something about illegal migrants going to Europe? No one's going to tell you that, right? If you ask people who live in the Middle East, many of them will tell you that. Because if you live your life, it doesn't matter where necessarily, but if you live, well, actually it matters. Wait, let me rephrase that. If you live your life in, well, according to the so-called American imperialism, right? You will get an impression that Africa and Asia kind of don't exist. You'll probably get an impression that Australians, Africans, and even Asians You kind of get an impression that they're dum-dums, right? That they don't exist. They must be stupid or something, right? Now, I'm not saying it as if it may be. Obviously, all societies have their dum-dums. But looking carefully at the American agenda, what do you see more specifically, right? Everything that is invented, it must be either British or American. Everything that happens in the world, it's some scientific aspect done in an American or a British, or rare cases, European or, USA university, right? It's like the whole other part of the world is just idiots. They don't exist, right? How many times do you hear something good about Islam? How many times do you hear something good about Judaism? How many times do you hear something or anything about Hinduism, right? When you look at the so-called American imperialism mass media, right? The one which is most prevalent in America and obviously Europe, right? When you look, unfortunately, even in Asia, right? Many of them say, well, the American imperialism is bad and this and that, and they wouldn't want that, but they're still slave of a very similar system, unfortunately, right? When is it the last time that you hear actually something good about Asia, right? Russia is bad. Well, most of Russia is in Asia anyways, right? It's still the same superpower, right? China is bad, obviously, China is always bad, right? And then, the freaking Arabs, they're always bad, right? Something's quirky about them. There's always something quirky, murky about them, right? And, probably you hear from time to time something about North Korea launching another rocket, right? Another missile of theirs. And, it's like everything about Asia is bad, right? And then nothing else, right? Do you hear anything? No, nothing. No, obviously. Do you hear anything about Africa? There's quite a lot of African countries, right? Many of them have big populations. They have decent economies, but more importantly, they also have important resources. So as the world stands, you have to understand a revolution, a change will not come with just trying to wave some banners. First and foremost, you must understand a lot of blood will be spilled. A lot of things will be burned. Most likely, your country will end up being flattened to the ground. Just like American freedom has done with almost most, if not all, countries they have gone through in their military tours, right? We can take, for example, Iraq, right? We can take a look at Palestine. Well, but Palestine's destruction is all Israel. Well, Israel wouldn't have done shit without American backup, right? And British backup also. So one has to start reading things, learn your history, try to find ways through which you can provide value to society, because a new breed of people will come, right? Two actually breeds of people will come. A greater wave of idiots will come, and a greater wave of empathic people will come. Which one will you represent? It's your own choice. You have to understand God has no power in this. Stop believing in magical books and the such. Yes? Because if you look in the Middle East, there are so many groups, military groups that fight one another. They don't fight one another because they believe God will come one day, or Jesus or someone will come one day from the skies and solve their problems, right? When you look, for example, at Islam people, right? Who is their most important figure? Well, they obviously all respect Jesus, but Muhammad still remains the most important one, right? What do they say about Muhammad all the time? Barely do they present his name, and they always say, peace be among him, right? Or something around that. Yes, I'm not a Muslim, but, well, I do my research from time to time. What does that mean? That they are accepting the fact he is not going to come back. And in a way, the brutality of the Middle East is always based on the fact that you have to be the fucking one who does the things. If you want to blow up the government, you're going to have to do it, most likely. Because if you want to change your government, well, governmental means govern the mental of the people anyways. Once you govern the mental, well, that means you have full control over them regardless, right? Because your mind creates your vision. Your mind creates your perception of reality, right? Which ultimately is your reality, not reality itself, Does any one government tell you this? No, obviously. And I sure hope I'm not the only one who told you that, or the first one who told you that, because there's a lot of wise people in the world, but for some reason I don't see too many of those being vocal enough, right? I've been saying controversial things on my channel. Sooner or later, did it. And well, I will keep up because I've got my own perceptions and I will keep up with it. This is the purpose of this channel, more or less, most of it, right? Try to present people with a different sense of the world and tell and remind them that there are other ways through which they can see the world. Who else is gonna tell you that? Well, definitely not your government. Gurus, maybe they will tell you. Yes, why not? Obviously. But, you know, your Jesus is not gonna tell you that. If you wanna do something with your life, do it nowadays. The best moment to have done it was yesterday. The second best moment is today. Well, maybe tomorrow you can start with the preparations today. But changing a country, changing a destiny of people is gonna take a lot of sacrifice. You have to understand you're gonna probably be in a place where your execution is gonna be something normal. You're gonna live a lot of nights in distress. You're gonna have to give up your family, right? Maybe you're good at becoming a spy, becoming a spy or, secret agent. Well, they're not called secret for nothing. Giving up your family, well, it may be a dream for some people, it may be a nightmare for the others, right? Change comes from great planning, from great people doing great planning, from great people who know history, who know the failures of their kind, who know the kinds of their people. Because you will have to do some people pleasing here and there. And no country will ever change without the help and recognition of others. In order to gain recognition from other countries, you will have to probably rebuild diplomatic communion, right? Connections with countries that you've been at war with. You will have to do so much research, so many sacrifices, right? You will have to understand a lot of people will die. And maybe your own damn fucking kind will try to fight you because what you're wanting to do with your change is obviously nothing else than fighting against their comfort zone, right? And remember in history, what has happened? Look in the history of Europe, look in the history of any tribe, anything. You can look even, and I would actually tell you, look more in the history of Asia, because Asia has had such a brutal past. All the killing, all the murders, and they've always had far superior populations number-wise. And the deaths obviously have been much greater. When you look at those, a certain regime was overthrown. What did happen? Another authoritarian came after, right? Who sought to make a better world. But, well, what did they do? Well, they definitely created a better world most likely for them. A better world typically will always exist at the expense of others. Look, for example, in China. China is a good example to look, right? China is yet another very young country, if you look at it, because, well, if we talk about China of today, China has been unified around 200 years ago, right? When if I remember correctly, the three kingdoms, it all ended with them, right? When the great battle of one of the kingdoms, led it to a victory against the other two kingdoms. And I think it was the time of Sun Quan the emperor, right? I think Sun Quan for the Chinese people is kind of almost equally important as Muhammad for the Muslims, or as Jesus for the Christians, right? You have to understand that change will happen, but a lot of blood will be spilled. Stop it with the flower power and invoking peace and harmony and, only bullies do that. Because whoever is doing bad deeds obviously will expect the same, at least in return. So if someone loves murder, obviously what will they impose when they become a ruler? They will impose that no one does murders, so that they will be the only ones. Because whoever does murders, they will always believe one day someone will do a murder against them. Whoever is a thief will always have the greatest fear that one day someone will steal everything from them. Whoever is a big liar, someone will Obviously, they will live with the idea that one day they will be betrayed. So you have to understand psychology plays a very important role. If you think you can overthrow your government and just that, you're forgetting that they have almost endless money because they can print their own fucking money, but not you. They have people who have mastered the art of persuasion, the art of understanding what a damn nation wants, right? How to keep lying them with a new breed of lies, right? About their stupid, silly little freedom. You have to understand an internal struggle may appear, civil unrest will appear, and after that, and during it, and afterwards, you will probably find yourself again parasited by the same freaks who fled your country when you started doing your change, but they came back with the civil unrest. You'll probably realize that your country will probably lose even 70% of the civilians, of the population. Screw that in the end. With great power comes great responsibility. There will always be a lot of people who will lose their lives, right? In all of these changes. Remember, Rome was burned several times, and when you look at it, a lot of people died, but it was rebuilt. And with great administrative actions, you can remake a population great in numbers again. But education will always be more important. It is better to have 100, uh, let's say, good people in a mass of 200 than have 100 good people in a mass of 10,000. There is a huge power in these percentages. You will need people who can understand more through empathy, not understand more through apathy, right? Apathic people will understand a lot of things. Empathic people will understand many things. Which you will choose to join is up to you. Hopefully this video rose a bit of awareness. You are appreciated. Take care. Enjoy life. This being said, Ferenc Board signing out.